Rise of Hawk, Part 3, Scene 4. The young man with Nalana was tense, and Risa eyed him wearily. It wasn't much to look at. Plain, square face, scruffy brown hair, barely taller than she was. Even his bright blue eyes seemed painfully normal and non-threatening. But her instinct for people never steered her wrong, and it knew that something was off about this man. It was the kind of off that was usually dangerous. In the entrance of their old wooden house, Risa put an arm around Nalana's shoulders, steering away from this Nathan and towards the sitting room. So, was it today you had your exam? Yes, Nalana exclaimed, grinning. I'm hoping for an A. Risa chuckled. Smart girl like you, course ya. Looking around the cluttered sitting room, she tried to remember where in all this mess Nalana's stuff had been put. The whole house was full, almost as if they'd moved from a 10-bedroom mansion into a small apartment. Stacks of boxes were piled high, up to the ceiling at some points, and scattered all around, making movement throughout the house, and especially their sitting room, really rather hazardous. She let go of Nala's shoulders and, leaning over a nearby crate, Risa shuffled through a bunch of kitchen odds and ends. I'm sure they're in here, she frowned. Somewhere. Hey, Rob, where'd you put that stuff for Nala? In the corner, a voice called out through the open doorway that led into their tiny kitchen. On top of those clothes. Are they staying for lunch? Nope. She pushed her feet carefully through the miasma of boxes as she made her way to the far corner of the room near the kitchen. Nalana followed. They'd done a number of raids recently and had everything from canned food to clothes and even weapons. But the weapons had been put in the east bedroom, where they could be locked up. The two-bedroom house really was far too small for such a large haul of supplies, but soon enough it would be cleared out as rebel groups came to collect their share. Bending over the haphazard lines of crates, Risa noticed in the corner of her eye that Nathan inched steadily closer to where Nala stood in the doorway. Something was wrong, and she could sense it. Glancing sideways, she eyed him warily. Nathan launched towards Nala while grabbing Risa's elbow and pulled the three of them down to the floor in a heap. As they landed, gunfire sounded, and above their heads bullets ripped holes in the walls and shredded the head-high boxes all around them. When the gunfire ceased, Nathan dragged everyone to their feet and pulled them towards the kitchen. Dislodging her elbow, she glared at him. How did you know? Dodge talent, danger sense, he said curtly. Back door? Yes. She gestured across the kitchen to the other side with a flick of her hand. But we can't not fight. If you stay here, you'll die. Ice blue eyes stared into her, and for a moment Risa recognized something deeper in this young man. It was something cold and veiled, something that acted without emotion and was therefore capable of anything. Risa swallowed. Nalana. His eyes dropped from Risa to take in the young woman. You trust me? Of course, Nay, but what? Do exactly as I say and we'll get out of this. Understand? A loud bang from the direction of the front door shook their rickety walls and echoed through the floor. Again gunfire sounded, but this time from inside the house. Pulling her weapon out of its holster, Risa glanced sideways at her second-in-command, Rob, who stood behind them at the kitchen bench. The others? She asked him. He was a telepath and would know if the other two were savable. Rob's bottom lip lifted and he shook his head. Okay, let's get out of... Down! Nathan ordered, and in front of them Nalana ducked. He pulled a weapon out of his jacket and fired through the doorway over the girl's head. In the sitting room, a black suit agent stepped into the line of fire and dropped dully to the floor. Come on. Nathan grabbed Nalana's hand and pulled the girl past Risa, towards the back door. With one tense glance at Rob, Risa decided to follow this man and retreat. Outside, Nathan led them hurriedly down the steps and across the gravel towards the old garage at the back of the property. Down, he commanded again, and this time all three of them ducked. He fired one shot over their heads at the back door. As Risa got to her feet again, she looked behind her, and a second man in black fatigues lay motionless on the gravel. She blinked at the body. He was a very good shot. Too good to be just an illegal Psy like herself. Run, Nathan yelled, and they followed him into the old garage. 100 years ago, houses were either made out of wood or brick. The rich could afford to buy the expensive dark bricks from the Marakan quarries to build their houses. The poorer working class were forced to build with wood, which tended to rot or succumb to termites over time. Their old garage was a perfect example of the finite life of wood buildings. But perhaps this time it was fortunate, because there was a large rotted hole in the back wall from which they could escape. How Nulla's friend knew this was another matter entirely. The four of them scrambled through the gap, out onto a street beyond, and over the tarmac for the cover of a narrow path between buildings. Running for several blocks in a southerly direction, they dipped in and out of lanes and alleys to brush off the agency pursuit. And they could run no more. They slowed their pace and slipped into another cobbled grey driveway behind buildings. "Looks like," Nalana gasped between words, "you saved me again, Nay. Someone might think you want to get into my knickers." The young man laughed. "I'll leave that to Marcus. Besides, how would I get to sleep without your stories?" They both laughed at each other, and Risa lifted an eyebrow. "This has happened before?" Lifting one hand, she shook her head dismissively. "No, don't tell me. Let's focus on getting out of here. Either of you know how to get back to Namas?" Scene 5. Nama grumbled wordlessly. Nathan had disappeared again when he wasn't supposed to, and Alana was overdue from her exam at the cathedral. He turned around at the entrance to their building and paced back down the hall towards Talon. "One of us should have gone with her," he barked. Talon sighed. "For founder's sakes, relax. Nathan will look after her. It'll be fine." A spark of anger stopped Nama's pacing, and he glared at Talon. "You're assuming they're together. What if they're not? What if Nala's alone and in trouble? What if those gangsters have found her again?" Talon shrugged. "She's not completely helpless. Have you seen the size of the flick knife she carries with her now? Besides, where does Nay usually go? When they're not here, they're always together. I'm sure they'll be fine." Nama grunted, brushing off Talon's logic with a dismissive hand gesture, and continued to pace. Footsteps walked towards them on the street, and Alana moved in through the open doorway of the building. "Hey, Nama." She put a tiny hand on his arm as she walked past. His worry dissipated into a smile. "Hey, how was your exam, kiddo?" She grinned back at him. "I want an A." He laughed as she kept walking. "Is Marcus back from doing the deliveries yet, Tay?" Yeah, Talon smiled, following her inside. "He's in the front of the fire, I think. So was your exam really that good?" Sensing Nathan's mind outside, Nama pushed through the grimy doorway, stepped onto the street, and glared down at Nathan as he walked towards him. "What did I ask you to do this morning, Nathan?" The young man was forced to step back. "I did all of those chores before I left." "Well, there's more to do," he roared. "Now get inside." "Aren't I allowed a break?" Nathan sighed. Nama put a broad hand on his back and pushed the young man through the doorway. "Maybe when you did, son." Nama's flash of anger blew away as he saw that Nathan wasn't alone on the street. "Risa, Rob." He grinned at the two ex-desert dwellers walking towards him. "What brings you to our fine establishment?" The answering tension in Risa's nearly black eyes loosened the smile on Nama's face. She sighed. "Our safe house was taken out. I need to talk with you in private." "Of course." He indicated the door with an up-facing palm. "Come on in." He led them through a maze of dark passages and hallways to the centre of their building, where a large windowless space served as their main common room. A fire burned in the hearth, warming the rooms around it and keeping much of the building dry from the inside out. In the flickering glow of the hearth, and leaning back in Marcus's arms, Nalana was talking about her exam. Next to them sat Nathan and Tay, listening to her exploits. Nama led Risa and Rob through to the other side of the common room to Usher's office door. It was a glorified cupboard, with desks and bookcases on every wall, and very little standing space. However, it was also mostly side-shielded, so they could talk in relative privacy. When they entered the room, Usher was sitting at one of the desks, writing with pen and paper. Tired, angry blue eyes looked up at him over their work. "What is it?" she barked. "Usher, this is Risa and Rob from the Central Supply Cell. They've got something to discuss with us." Not knowing who Usher was, Risa stepped confidently towards her. "Yes, you're Nathan. Is he trustworthy?" Usher straightened in her chair. "Why do you ask?" "Our safe house was taken out by the agency. I lost 2 men, and he seemed to know there was danger before it happened." The tension in Usher flowed into boredom, and she shrugged. "He's a dodge talent. It's normal for them to sense danger before Do you know what my speciality is? Risa didn't pause long enough to let Asha reply. I know people. Never steered me wrong before, and that boy's dangerous. Mark my words. Asha sighed. Do you have anything other than instinct to give me? I can't lock him up for that. Risa shook her head. Not really. He was tense when we came round. Knew when to duck. He's a crack shot too. Took out 2 blue suits, 1 bang each, dead. And calm as a statue all the while. No fear. The boy's not an agent. He's out of his mind. Asha got to her feet. Yes, we're all well aware of his odd personality traits. But he's been with us for nearly a year, and he's shown no sign of hostility towards us. If he was an agent, surely he would have attacked by now. She sat back again in her chair with a sigh. Look, thank you for bringing this to us. We appreciate your concern. But now that you're here, I actually have a request for you from Hawk. We need your help for a mission we're going to start the day after tomorrow. Risa frowned, putting her hands on her hips. Us? What use can we be? We're going to raid a desert training base. Haida Chenna, are you mad? Retorted Rob in his Naradan-like accent. No, not mad. If Hawk says it can be done, it can be, she said firmly. What we need is for you to go north to Epa and use your local contacts. Set up the groundwork to get us safely in and out of the desert. Asha handed over an envelope. Here are Hawk's instructions and enough resources to get you up there immediately. Risa looked confused as she took the envelope. What, you want us to go now? As soon as possible, yes. Confusion on Risa's face deepened. What about this Nathan? I still sense he's trouble. We'll keep an eye on him. Don't worry about that. Asha looked down at her work. Good day. Nama moved to let the others leave. When they were alone in the room, he crossed his arms over his chest. What's wrong? You're not normally that brisk with people. She sighed. The anger had lifted from her features, revealing a deep weariness in her dark blue eyes. I'm sorry, Nama. I haven't slept much with all this work. Hawk forgets sometimes that I'm only one woman. Can I help? No, she sighed again. You would need to meet him, and it's not safe yet. Nama lifted an eyebrow. Yet? Yes, after certain events, you and a few of the others will be allowed to meet him. For now, it's barely safe for me to know, let alone anyone else. Could you go check on our prisoner down in the basement for me? She leaned over the desk and put her forehead on her arms. I'm going to rest my eyes for half an hour and keep going. He smiled. Yes, ma'am. Scene 6. The same day, Agency Tower, approximately midday. Trian Rena stood in the hallway of Level 9 Agency accommodation block. Several months ago, her grandnephew, Bana, and his wife had been killed by the rebels on mission. Their little daughter, Gusa, had spent all of that time being handed from unwilling relative to unwilling relative. She sighed and crossed her arms over her chest as she waited. Trian's mother had given birth to her, fed her, and then killed herself for no reason. Everyone said it was because her mother had been a high-rated timesai, and it was a common belief that high-rated timesai became unstable. But whatever the cause of her mother's death, it had left little Trian alone in the world. Her father totally rejected her in his grief and passed her on to other relatives. She had spent her childhood being handed from one family to another, alone and unloved. As an adult, she'd made it her mission to change the agency from the inside, and to help every orphan child she could. A lifetime of work in the Azure Council had only produced the constant danger of being in opposition to Jaran Cody Sr., and adopting a series of abandoned and orphaned children over the years, alongside her own 4 children. She swallowed, and now, in the last few years before her retirement, she was about to take on the responsibility of Gusa, the second generation of her adopted waifs. The door opened, and the little blonde-haired girl looked up at her with massive grey-blue eyes. She looked so much like her mother. Trian swallowed back her grief and tried to smile. The little girl's mouth was formed into a pout, and Tree sensed an unyielding anger in her. Come, Gusa. Tree lifted the massive, faded pink backpack from the girl's grip, and holding her hand, led her down the carpet hallway towards the main elevator. They made their way through the bustling central lounge of Level 9 in silence. People rushed about. Some wore the uniform blue suits of on-duty agents, and others were wearing the muted colours of allocated off-duty clothes. No one dawdled or milled around doing nothing. Everyone had something that had to be done urgently somewhere else in the building. As the elevator doors opened, she lifted the 5-year-old into her arms and stepped inside. Gusa rested her head on her shoulder, and Tree sensed that the girl's suppressed grief and anger was exhausting her. "Where are we going, Auntie?" Her voice was quiet. Tree tucked the child's head under her chin. "We're going to my apartment, dear one." "Oh." When the elevator doors opened on level 20, Tree gently put Gusa back on the ground. The carpet on level 20 was a faded red colour, a deviation from the rest of the building's blue or green, but Tree appreciated the difference. Young Gusa ran ahead of her as she strode down the hall towards a frosted window at the end. "Auntie Trian?" The girl turned in front of the window, muted sunlight shimmering in her straw-yellow hair. "Are Mummy and Daddy in your apartment? Is that why we're going there?" Trian's lips tightened together for a moment as she suppressed her grief. "No, dear. You're coming to live with me like your daddy did when he was young. We'll make a really nice lunch." "How do rainbow sprinkle sandwiches sound?" The little girl covered her mouth and giggled. "Silly, sprinkles don't go on sandwiches, they go on cake." "Of course they go on sandwiches. How could your father forget such a thing?" She turned left, and putting her hand to the black security plate next to her door, Trian released the security lock. "Come on, Gusa. I'll show you." The girl walked around her and into the large apartment. Sunlight shone through the broad windows of her sitting room, spilling into the parlour in long golden puddles. Still running, the little girl shot through the parlour and into the sitting room, only to stop abruptly. Trian sensed confused tension in the little girl, and dropping her bag to the floor, she followed. "Hello," said the little girl shyly. "My name's Gusa. What's yours?" A voice answered, but was so quiet Trian didn't hear the words. She stepped into the sitting room, and behind her robin's egg blue couch was her daughter Gwyn. She was in the corner all curled up with her own daughter, Cassandra, in her arms. Tree sensed fear and pain in Gwyn, and forgetting her alien knees and hip, she dropped down next to Gwyn on the cream-coloured carpet. "Happy Kashan, what's wrong?" She rested her hand on her daughter's aching body. Blonde hair covered Gwyn's face, but there were dark, finger-shaped bruises on her bare arms. "What's happened, Gwyn?" "Mother." Gwyn lifted her chin to look at her. Tears filled her daughter's dark blue eyes, and a dark welt sat across her cheekbone. Trian's jaw tightened. "Did Morna do this?" She nodded. "I'm going to rip that boy's face off," Trian nearly roared. "No, Mother, you know you can't. Sharan will make you suffer if you go near his precious son." The look in her daughter's eyes was one of pained anger, but not of defeat. "There's a way out." She unfolded the arms that were wrapped tightly around little Cassandra's shoulders and held up a yellow sticky note. Trian gasped. "Is that what I think it is?" "Yes, it says for us to come here." "Come, sit on the couch and I'll get you an ice pack. Are you hungry?" She glanced at little Cassandra, who gripped her mother tightly and wouldn't meet Trian's eyes. "Did he hurt her?" "No, as far as I can tell, she's okay. Aren't you, my love?" Gwen affectionately kissed the 6-year-old's white blonde hair, but there was still no response from the little girl. The doorbell jingle sounded from the ceiling with a little artificial bird twitter, and Trian tensed. "Gusa," she touched the girl's arm gently, "let's play a game. I want you to hide with Gwen and Cass here. You need to be as quiet as a mouse. Quieter. Do you understand?" The girl nodded and sat down on the carpet up against the wall. Gwen opened her arms and pulled Gusa into her embrace with Cassandra. Blonde and blue-eyed, the two girls were only second or third cousins, but they were so similar in colouring and shape that together they looked like sisters, close enough even at the age of 5 and 6 to look like twins. Trian gave the threesome a tight little smile and hauled herself to her feet. With a well-practised calm, she made her way to the security panel and swiped a finger across it. The door unlocked and opened to reveal another of her many relations. Brushing nervously at his dark hair with one hand, Tyrrus gave her a tense smile. "Great Aunt Trian," he said in an overly formal voice. "May I come in?" Man was not normally a tense or nervous person, which meant something was up. She nodded and indicated he was welcome with a sweep of one arm. Of course, Terrace. Please come in. Would you like a hot drink? He stepped inside, shaking his head as she closed the door. No, thank you, Auntie. He paused, and she sensed that he really was very tense. I don't... He sighed and lifted one hand out of his suit jacket pocket. Between two fingers he held a yellow sticky note. You're here for Gwen, aren't you? He frowned, bringing black brows together over his grey-blue eyes. Gwen? She has one as well. What does yours say? To come here. Why? Do you know what's going on? She shook her head. No, I don't, but if he wants to help my daughter escape, I'm willing to give it a go. Can I see it? Terrace handed the scrap of paper over. The handwriting on the note was curved and ever so slightly sloped. There was no more information other than to come and visit her. If this is from you-know-who, we'll have to be very careful about disposing of these. Please, go into the sitting room and say hello to Gwen, Cass, and Gussa. I'll be there in a moment. She turned towards her kitchen. It was a nice room, long and fairly wide, with wood cupboards on either wall, and a nice creamy stone-top island that ran through the middle. She went to her fridge and opened the freezer door. An ice pack sat on the bottom shelf, with 2 small yellow sticky notes attached to it. She blinked at it in surprise. Not even Jaron Cody Sr. should have clearance to get into her apartment without her permission. However, Hawk was known to get his notes to places that seemed impossible, so she shouldn't be too surprised. Grabbing the sticky notes and the ice pack, she closed the freezer door and walked back into her sunny sitting room. One note started with, for Trian, the other for Terrace. There's more, Terrace. He sat on the floor, his back against her couch, facing Gwen and the 2 girls. Here, Gwen. She handed the ice pack to her daughter and his note to Terrace. Pulling a low chair around next to them, Triana sat and put her reading glasses on. Book a day trip for 2 adults and 3 children for tomorrow, 11:30 a.m. Be cautious. He will trace it. Keep them with you. Trian knew what Jaron would do to them if he discovered those yellow notes in their hands. She'd been on the council when Jaron took over from Ara as head, and she'd seen the danger in the young man's eyes then, even then. 20 years later, Jaron was now probably the most dangerous man in Arana, more so even than the most powerful Spades boss. I've got to go. Terrace's voice was quiet, and he looked first at Gwen with the ice pack to her cheek, and then at Trian. Be careful, Auntie. Here. He handed her his sticky notes. Burn them all. We'll probably only get one shot at this. I'll let you know when I know more. Terrace got to his feet and walked towards her parlour. She heard the door click closed and looked down at his second note. It said, meeting, 2nd floor, in the blue room, 5 minutes. Trian folded the notes in half and collected her daughter's one as well. Come, dear daughter, I'll burn these in the kitchen, and we can show young Gussa and Cassandra how nice rainbow sprinkle sandwiches are. Her daughter smiled at her over the ice pack. You're still making sprinkle sandwiches, Mother. The day I stop making them is the day I die. Scene 7. Hawk stood utterly still in the darkest corner of the blue room. The shadows from gaps in the blinds cast oddly around him, making him practically invisible at first glance. He waited impassively for Terrace Millar to arrive. Asha would say such a move was too much of a risk. To reveal himself to someone whose alliances weren't known was very dangerous. But she didn't completely understand their situation, nor what was really at stake with Gwen and Cassandra escaping. If Asha knew what he knew, she would probably come for them herself and tear up the tower. A wave of dark static energy triggered from his centre and moved slowly out from him, like a solar flare. Terrace must be close, he thought dimly. The echoes of what will be would very soon meld with what is and then what was. It was important that all 3 were the same, or Terrace would turn away and innocent lives would be lost. The door handle moved and someone stepped through into the room while barely making a sound. Even in the darkness, Hawk recognized the tall, lean form of Terrace Millar, cousin of both Bana and Kita. Terrace looked around the dim room, but, as many people were apt to do with a ghost, He didn't see Hawk standing in the shadows, even though he looked right at him. Terrace closed the door and stood in the shadows for a few moments. His fearful breathing and tense shoulders betrayed how afraid he was. Then, as expected, he turned to the enviro panel on the wall and lifted the light level with a flick of one finger over the touchpad. The lights came on, brushing away all of the shadows and illuminating Hawk's figure. Terrace turned back to look at the room again and yelped in surprise. Hawk stepped out of the corner towards him, still not saying anything, waiting for the right time to say the right words. Terrace's surprise lifted into fear, then, just as quickly, his shoulders dropped into defeat. His voice was quiet and very sad. I knew you were cold, but I didn't know you were so heartless that you would set up 2 little girls for execution, simply to get 3 traitors. A smile played at the edges of Hawk's mouth. Is my cover really that good? Terrace frowned. Cover? What, now you want to trick me into thinking that you are him? But I am. You can't be. You're not even Time Psi. I am now. How do you want me to prove it to you? There was a pause, and the 2 men stared at each other, one absolutely calm, the other with a little tense frown on his face. Dog, they said in unison. Red wine carbon copy, psychosomatic sprinkle sandwiches. Again, said in uncanny harmony. Terrace was too strong a telepath, and Hawk not strong enough for that particular trick to work in any way other than with a high-rating Time Psi ability, and they both knew it. Terrace leaned on the wall next to him, seeming to suddenly realise what it could all mean. But if you're Hawk... Yes, I'm taking a great risk in meeting you. I'm showing you a depth of trust that exceeds our current social and professional situation. Why did you then? Why take such a risk? You know as well as I what he'd do if he got a hold of this information. Hawk nodded slowly. I did it because what I am about to ask you to do is far too much. I'm revealing myself to show you how important it is that they escape. Gwen and Cassandra? Gwen, Cassandra, Gusa, Orion, and Bo. He paused and gave the older man a slight smile. And you, if you survive. Terrace frowned. Why Gusa? She'd be safer with Aunt Triana, surely. Bana is alive. He is? Terrace seemed genuinely surprised. Is he a rebel? Hawk shook his head. No, not yet. He's a prisoner. But the only way to convince him to join us is by freeing Gusa, and we need him to help you escape. Why Bana? Hawk smiled. He can fly a helicopter. Terrace stepped back, a tense smile crossing his face. Exactly how difficult is this escape going to be? Fairly, but not impossible. However, I think you have some understanding of the seriousness of the situation. And if you agree to do this, I understand. It's all or nothing, right? Because if I get captured, you're dead, as well as the 100 or so rebels. 2,500 rebels, Hawk corrected. And yes. 2,500? Terrace laughed. You're not half putting on the pressure, are you? Hawk grinned. As I said, there's a lot at stake here, but you're perfectly capable of pulling it off. Okay. Terrace nodded slowly. So what exactly am I going to have to do? Hawk lifted out a small PDA computer from his jacket and flicked the lid of it up and around to reveal a video recorder. You're going to offer a full interview to the news station that comes to the roof of the tower with a helicopter at midday tomorrow. This recording will be broadcast on all channels 30 minutes before midday. If you make it to the roof by that time, Bana and my second, Asha, will be there with a helicopter to get you out. Terrace laughed. You're right, that is a ridiculous plan. But will you do it? He frowned. How do I know you're not setting me up? You don't? Hawk smiled confidently. Not for certain. The fact that I'm standing here in front of you should be enough for you to trust that I'm not setting you up for execution. Good point, he said quietly. So, if this succeeds, what do you want me to do on the outside? We can talk about that when you're out. Will you do it? Mischief lifted into Terrace's square face. A chance to thumb my nose at Jaron Cody Sr., get Gwen out, and jump off a building into a helicopter? How could I refuse? The mischief lifted away and looked off to the side. What about Alaha and the children? Will they be safe? They're all out of the city, and there is no link between them and your escape. Your ex-wife may never forgive you, but they will be safe. The only person left behind at any risk will be Treon, and I will do my best to help her. Okay then, Terrace rubbed his hands together. Let's start. Scene 8. Desert Training Base. Just south of Epa. 3 p.m. Zack sat on an uncovered corner of the exercise yard with the rain pouring down around him. Everyone else, the 40 or so students between the ages of 11 and 17, were huddled under what few roof covers there were, trying to avoid getting wet. Zack wasn't worried about the rain. He figured he was going to get wet anyway, so why fight it? It was easier just to sit there and enjoy not being hot for a while. His frown deepened. Hawk had come to him. To him, Zachary Kane, 16 years old and seemingly a nobody. Hawk wanted him and his friends to become rebels, and he was going to send people to break them out. He would become a rebel, and he would finally be able to tell Hawk about the dreams. It's all he'd ever wanted to do and be since he was 12 years old, when he realized that his dreams were connected to a real person. A little smile etched back the edges of his frown. He was actually going to meet Hawk. All morning, even at that very moment, the lines and threads of time seemed to quiver around him. It made the air and the rain that pelted down seem charged with an itchy, excited static. The effect on time itself from their one interaction was massive, practically world-changing even. Nothing else he'd ever experienced with his time psi ability made the world shake and shimmer like that. So he had no doubt that it had actually happened and wasn't some kind of trick. The problem was he couldn't prove it to anyone else. He sighed and looked down at the black sand covering his feet. How was he going to bring up what had happened that morning with the others? How could he even start to explain? Oh, by the way, I talked to Hawk this morning. He said the rebels are coming to get me, and you guys can come too. He snorted at how ridiculous his own thoughts sounded. The other 4 didn't really understand his visions to begin with, let alone something like this. Would they believe him? Would they come with him? Could they pull it off and not get killed? He sighed again and lifted his feet out of the sand. If he kept thinking like that, he was going to make himself neurotic. Zack stood and looked for his friend Levi, who was one of the few other non-kinetics left of his age. She was also the one who'd invited Zack into their little group to be protected. Zack knew he could probably tell Levi about what had happened, and then Lee would help him tell the others. Looking around, he caught sight of his friend on the other side of the yard, near the main door. Levi was tall and thin, with mousy hair and an easy smile. They made eye contact across the yard. He stepped towards her. Zack sensed danger, ducked, rolled out of the way, and was up on his feet again before his conscious mind figured out that someone had tried to attack him. It was a roar of frustration to one side of him, and Rega, the worst bully, lunged for him. The dark-haired boy was bigger and stronger than Zack, and they both knew if Rega hit him, even once, he would go down and stay down. Being smaller and quicker made him a target, but it also helped him stay out of the bully's reach. Zack, someone called out from behind him. He ducked down under huge, lunging arms and skittered towards the voice. Levi stood with her hand pressed on the metal of the exit door. The lock was magnetic, which meant that with a little time, Levi and her EM talent could reverse the polarity and open the lock, but it wasn't open yet. Reaching his friend, Zack put his back to the door and turned to face Rega. Tall, blonde-haired Liz stepped out of the crowd on one side and put herself between him and Rega. Rega, she said with an ominous tone to her voice. What did I tell you about Zack? If I get to him first, he's mine, growled the older boy from the middle of the yard. No, Preta, she snarled back. Let's try this again. The bully rose up into the air with a whimpering squeal. Liz juggled the boy up and down in the falling rain above him like a rag doll. She was the strongest kinetic of all the kids, but even that wasn't enough to dissuade Rega from going after those kids she protected. Zack wasn't the kind of person to get enjoyment from the suffering of others, but the squeal of fear in Rega's voice as he was tossed in the air was oddly satisfying. Behind Zack, the metal wall shifted, and stumbling, he nearly fell backwards into the corridor beyond. Levi, grinning with victory, played silently on an invisible electric guitar. Zack skittered through the gap and looked behind him. "Don't get caught, Zack." He saw the outline of a smiling face, and the door closed again. He stood alone in the dark concrete corridor. It was against the rules for a student to be in the halls when they were supposed to be in the yard, so he had to hide. But there was only one place without a camera: the unisex bathroom. As he ran down towards the doors, he made the decision. He had to tell the others what had happened. They probably wouldn't believe him, but they deserved the choice.